Good morning, everyone, or good afternoon, depending on which part of the country you're in. My name is Lisa Helps, and I'm the Mayor of Victoria, and it is my honor to welcome you to the second Coast Talk. I'd like to begin by acknowledging that here in Victoria, we are on the Lekwungen territories, the homelands of the Songhees and the Esquimalt nations. And as we're doing the work here, growing the ocean and marine industry, we're working closely with and relying on thousands of years of big data and information from our First Nations colleagues. So always important to not only acknowledge their territory, but also the learning and wisdom and knowledge that they bring to our organization and to our city. So welcome, as I said, to Coast Talks. This is a series that is put on by COAST, which is the Center for Ocean Applied Sustainable Technologies. It's a new organization here in the South Island of Vancouver Island. And I'm a board member, but also proud Mayor of Victoria, and happy to have COAST starting up here in our region. So just a little bit about COAST and then about the series. And then without further ado, you all came to hear about AR and VR as it relates to the ocean and to ocean futures. So COAST is Canada's hub for the blue economy in the Pacific. That's our vision. And our mission is to drive inclusive prosperity in BC's sustainable economy through innovation, entrepreneurship and expansive partnerships. And again, COAST is a new hub that's starting here. And one of our mandates is to profile the amazing companies that are already working and growing in the ocean space, as well as partners like the Royal Canadian Navy. And those are some of the people you are going to hear from today. So the Coast Talk series is started last month and goes all the way until the end of the year. And again, the idea is to profile opportunities for growth and innovation in the blue economy, both here in British Columbia, but across the country and around the world. Today's talk, as you know, because you signed up for this purpose, focuses on AR and VR. And we're really lucky to have a great panel with us this morning. It's hosted by Charles Levine. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about him, and then I'm going to hand it over to Charles. Before I do that, though, I will let you all know about the next Coast Talk, which is Wednesday, July 21st, same time, 11 a.m. And we're going to have a really interesting panel on that day as well, focusing on collaboration between Atlantic and Pacific Canada in terms of growing the ocean economy for the country as a whole, working together coast to coast. But today, it's my pleasure to introduce to all of you Charles Levine. He's the president and the CEO of Lamazoo. He's going to discuss Lamazoo's spatial data platform called Spatial BI, and how it's used today to enable better land stewardship for First Nations, used by engineering, planning by industry, and stakeholder alignment between all stakeholders, including regulators, and specifically to talk about how AR and VR play a critical role in the future of spatial data and the ocean economy. So he's a homegrown hero, and I'm going to turn it over to him. He'll introduce the other panelists, and enjoy the show.
Thank you, Mayor Helps. Thanks everyone for joining us today. First, I want to acknowledge with respect that we are guests of the Lekwungen speaking people's territory. We'd like to also acknowledge the surrounding territories of the Esquimalt, Songhees, and Wet'suwet'en. I also want to, more importantly, or equally importantly, want to acknowledge that we're horrified by the news of the remains of the 215, if not more, children that have been found on the grounds of the former Kamloops Residential School, which sits on the traditional territories of the Tk'emlúps First Nation. Our hearts really do go out to all of the families and communities who have been affected by this tragic loss over the years. Today, I'm excited to talk about this topic that the COAST organizers have asked me to convene our esteemed panel on. And then really it's about the impact these fringe technologies have on current and future economies like the ocean and blue economy. We're going to hear from each of our panelists today, including myself, from a short presentation followed by a rapid fire discussion. Once we're done these presentations and discussions, we're going to open it up through Zoom Q&A. Of course, it's important to mention that this session is being recorded, and you can submit your questions anonymously if you prefer. So without further delay, I'm going to jump in to sharing my screen. Let's hope I get this right the first try. Are you guys seeing the animated Lamazoo logo? I'm guessing so. Okay. So what we're seeing happening today is a Cambrian explosion of data. There's about 90% of the world's data has been created in the last 2 years alone. 90% of data generated daily is unstructured. 95% of businesses cite managing unstructured data as a problem. And most companies only analyze 12% of the data they have. Now, the real kicker is that spatial data represents 80% of the world's big data. And we know that 96.5% roughly of our oceans hold the Earth's water. So in summary, the problem is that physical assets and the environment, which are multi-stakeholder operations and issues, generate lots and lots of big data. This data is fragmented, it's unstructured, it's spatial in nature, and it's generally incompatible with today's data analysis tools. So we have a really messy problem around data fragmentation, and that's causing effectively the data lake to turn into a data swamp. And what the Lamazoo SBI platform does is it takes this data swamp and it turns it into a Zen garden that's easy to navigate and access data and understand and interpret data. And we do this by providing a common operating picture that's data-driven, or what is often called a digital twin. And this enables collaborative spatial business intelligence. So you're probably asking yourself, what is spatial business intelligence? Well, it's effectively the combination of these different data sets from IoT and engineering and geospatial data with AI analysis and spatial computing, which equals spatial BI or spatial business intelligence. Spatial computing is where AR, VR exists under the overarching umbrella term for research. And so what that looks like in terms of who's using our platform and what they're using it for, we have First Nations, we have regulators, and we have industry all across BC and Canada that are using our spatial BI platform to effectively bring all of their GIS data, satellite, drone imagery, even bathymetry data together to create that common operating picture. And so what I'm showing you guys here is about over 100 years of spatial data, including aquatic, archaeological, rivers and lakes, hundreds of layers collected over hundreds of years. We have forestry data dating back to the late 1800s, the early 1900s, and cultural data from First Nations that spans many hundreds of years. And so by creating that spatial digital twin, we effectively unlock the ability for non-subject matter experts to access and analyze the data just as if they were subject matter experts, but without requiring the deep knowledge and the tools that are typically siloed to those data sets. So you can see here many hundreds of data sets. This is about a 1.5 million hectare area. And it looks like a map, but we can actually zoom in at a very high fidelity, very high resolution, all the way down to the ground floor and see individual trees that have been integrated from LiDAR data, and then even House of Unity that has been captured from drone imagery using photogrammetry. So incredibly high resolution. And of course, this is all accessible not only on desktop, but on a VR headset and an AR device, such as a tablet. And why that's really important is that through experiential design and user experience, we can make data more accessible for all stakeholders, whether they're regulators, landowners, or even industry. And so how First Nations are now using these technologies, these incredibly powerful technologies and fringe technologies, is that they're digitizing their land, which is enabling them to become better stewards of the environment. And when an industry comes and has a proposal or a project through the referral process, that data now gets integrated and can be visualized and analyzed in context of all the other data, which is incredibly powerful. So I'm just going to skip ahead. So some of the top 3 use cases of spatial BI digital twins include stakeholder alignment, so achieving alignment and shared understanding among many people, planning, efficient coordinated planning and design, de-risking decision-making and accelerating the planning process, but also operations, providing remote support, real-time operational awareness, and simulation of potential futures. So we can actually show through a data-driven approach what the future is going to look like 20, 30, 50, even 100 years. We can use AI to simulate tree regrowth and land development and even coastline height and elevation. So all of this data comes from a multitude of sources, whether that's bathymetry from ships, drones, satellite imagery, IoT sensors, number of sources. In terms of other use cases, there's a multitude. I'm not going to dive into all of them because that would be at least an hour's worth of presenting and talking. And it's also really important to mention that digital twins have a certain maturity level. There's different types of digital twins. It's a relatively newish term since 2002. I believe it was coined by NASA. But you can kind of look, starting from the bottom, static engineering data is a type of digital twinning. It represents an asset or a process, but it's a static model, very limited data. And as we kind of grow in maturity with digital twins from BIM to digital twinning 1.0 through 4.0, we eventually get to what's called an autonomous digital twin. And that's where the digital twin is actually influencing reality through simulation and AI. So think of robots on an assembly line or a wind turbine that is adjusting its facing direction to optimize its energy output, etc. So what are the experts saying? Well, McKinsey Digital states that if policymakers and businesses get it right, linking the physical and digital worlds could generate up to $11 trillion in economic value by 2025. Now, what McKinsey kind of failed to capture or foresee is the shortage of data analysts to process the data and the lack of managers potentially to understand that data. And we really see that digital twins and through the power of AR, VR, we can unlock that next generation of value from the data. So if anybody has any questions or wants to get in touch, please reach out. Simple email, charles@lamazoo.com. Thank you very much. We'll just end. And I want to introduce Scott Dewis. Scott is actually a very good friend of mine. He's also the Chief Visionary Officer and co-founder of Race Rocks, majority Indigenous owned business based in Victoria, BC. Race Rocks is creating a world of limitless learning through immersive learning experiences and custom software tools using cutting-edge technology to create realistic, interactive experiences for learners to practice and adapt from the classroom into the real world. Take it over, Scott.
Thank you, Charles. I'll just get my screen set up here. Hopefully the L tracks me. Give me 1 second. You stole a bit of my thunder there with the intro, but here we go. Great. So yeah, so I'm Scott Dewis, Chief Vision Officer of Race Rocks, where we're looking to create a world of limitless learning with enabled teams and empowered decisions. And so I'm going to go through a bit of a presentation on the company, little bit of an intro to the company. I'll show some of our capabilities and some of the programs that we've been working on, and then show a couple of video examples just so you can get an idea of what these products look like. And then afterwards, I'll be available with the rest of the panelists to take questions after everyone is finished. So intro to RaceRox. So RaceRox got its start. I actually had a company before this company called RaceRox Digital. For 8 years, we did Hollywood visual effects out of Victoria, BC. Got a lot of attention, and actually got the attention of a Canadian defense company that reached out to us in 2010 to help them increase the fidelity of their simulations. This new company, RaceRox 3D, was incorporated to get our security clearances and to start collaborating with this defense company. So today, like I said, incorporated in 2010, we're 100% Canadian-owned small business that provides aerospace and defense clients with technology, AR, VR, media story-based learning systems, as well as visual analytics tools for critical decision-making. We've won a few different awards along the way and are now, as of 2019, a woman Indigenous owned and led, equal opportunity, gender balanced organization that actively encourages and promotes thought leadership. So our mission, like we said before, is to create a world of limitless learning through realistic interactive experiences for people to practice and adopt. Our goal is to enable teams to empower decisions. And you can see up there, we've worked with a bunch of different international prime contractors on the aerospace and defense side, as well as directly to the government of Canada, the government of British Columbia, and in particular for this presentation to the Royal Canadian Navy. So we have two lines of business, like I was saying. One is technology-enabled learning, the other is visual data analytics. And when I say technology-enabled learning, we look at, we're a full service provider, so we go all the way from training needs analysis through to training plans, through to storyboards and development of training systems. And these training systems, there's a lot of companies that, let's say, are a virtual reality or an augmented reality company, and they walk around looking at every problem where virtual reality is the solution. We're not really like that. We do go all the way to simulation virtual reality, but we like to look at a problem and say, if I had all the money and the resources in the world, how would I teach this? And if the answer is, I would put a sign up that says, don't do that, then standard e-learning is probably the way that we would go. If the answer is, I'd go onto YouTube and watch a video about how to change my car tire, then potentially we would create a training video about how to change an airplane or a ship's system. If the answer is you really have to get in there and take that thing apart to see how it works and see how the sort of the flows and the way that the power works in it and how it comes apart and goes back together, then potentially using a video game to get inside the jet engine or to get inside the object and repair it virtually is the answer. And then if the answer is, well, you really have to be immersed to understand this, to pilot this aircraft, to really understand how to do this job, then and only then would virtual reality or augmented reality be the solution that we provide. The reason for this is that each of these solutions are become exponentially more expensive to build. So we like to look at everything from a blended approach, and we'll build a blended system that goes all the way from standard page turner e-learning through to virtual reality where appropriate. And then we have visual data analytics, and this is where we take big data like Charles was talking about, and we try and get it into the hands of the decision makers. So like he was saying with the shortage, often to understand the data that people have, they require an engineer and very specialized engineering programs. And then there's a step between the person that's running those programs and the person that has to actually make the decision, the VP, the commander, the sort of the higher level strategic decision making. There's a gap where if you can take that data and make it very easily visually accessible to someone that does not have the knowledge of those specialized programs, then they can very quickly make a decision. I'm going to show an example of that later on in the presentation. So some of the programs, just to sort of get a feel of what we've been doing over the years. we developed the very first virtual reality maintainer and assembly training system for the 737 MAX airplane and the 787 assembly lines for Boeing. I'll show a video of this in a bit, but it helped reduce classroom time by 80% and also increase the amount of time the course was available, because it used to be very hard to find these aircraft on the ground. Another key program is we developed the full training system for one of Canada's newer sort of contracted naval vessels, motor vessel asterisks. And so this was really a really neat program, because we were able to train the crew with the gap training, what they needed to know from what they know to what they needed to know to be on the ship while the ship was still being assembled, and provided the virtual training so that when they met the ship, they came on board with a base knowledge of all of what they needed to do. They'd already seen the hallways, they'd seen the operation of all the equipment, and then they just had to practice it hands-on to practice their trade. Another program is that we are working on two multi-year, one of them a 5-year program with the Royal Canadian Navy to implement distributed learning and support the RCN's Digital Navy initiative. So there's a little example of that. So like I was saying, we were able to train a crew before the ship that they were going to access actually hit the water, and they were able to get on board it. And so you know, this is a really efficient way to get people trained up, and it garnered some international attention. We've actually sold a simulation unit through another Canadian company into the Royal Australian Navy. We have similar systems that are being looked at by the French Navy and the Republic of Korea Navy. As well, we've collaborated with the United States Navy's Battlespace Exploration and Mixed Reality Lab, or BEMER Labs, and head them up to see Victoria and see the stuff that we're working on. Some of the technologies that we use, virtual reality, artificial intelligence, augmented reality, machine learning, and mixed reality are all key industrial capabilities or part of the technologies that Canada is looking to support with some of its programs, like the ITB program, which is the Industrial Technological Benefits Program. One of the key programs, and this is back to the visualization side, is that we built a visualization tool that allows decision makers to look at complex data and make critical decisions real time for the Victoria class submarines. And this was through an ITV investment, and allowed us to build a piece of technology that RaceRox owns that can help manage other complex fleets of things such as ships or aircraft or vehicles that need to be planned for. Filling out that program, we're also looking at visualization of complex things with TwinView, where we can look at a complex asset like a submarine and sort of see some of the programs and see some of the pieces that are in need of repair, or that have been repaired, or that or be able to tag different defects in critical assets. And something like a submarine, which is very complex, it's sometimes hard to know what's on the other side of a bulkhead. And so this sort of visualization tool allows people to know that if they're doing work on this side, it may affect, or it may also need to be done on the other side of a bulkhead. This is an example of the fleet view, where a decision maker can real time look at an asset and start changing the amount of work or the amount of maintenance that's being done on it, and see how that affects the entire fleet downstream and affects the deferred maintenance that they're going to encounter by putting that asset in the water. It'll give warnings to make sure that that any changes done, will still keep the asset running properly. So I've got some videos. I'm going to start sharing this, and I'm going to show a couple of videos just so that you can get a feeling of what the products look like, and then I'll hand it over to Chris from there. So let me just get to sharing the next screen. So this is an example of the virtual reality training system that we produced for Boeing. And it's just kind of a neat video that shows what something like this could look at. Again, this training was designed because it was very hard to access aircraft on the ground, and so it was very hard to get people into a live aircraft to conduct realistic training. It also there was a desire to reduce classroom time by up to 80%, so that maintainers were not sort of sitting in the classroom in Everett when they could be doing this training, on location wherever they were in the world. So. Just an example of sort of how immersive the virtual reality could be. And this is actually this is probably 2-year-old technology. Things are just getting better and better every year with virtual reality. The way that we conduct training is sort of the show me, the show me, guide me, let me technique with the training pedagogy, where we'll basically, you'll watch a movie first where the computer takes you through all the steps, and then the computer will guide you through each step, saying do this, do that, do this, do that. And then in the third pass, you're expected to remember what you'd seen and what you'd been guided through, and do the work yourself. And it's very effective. I can tell you that after watching, being guided, and then doing, it's you'll never forget the procedures. That's an idea of that. I'm going to switch over to an innovative R&D project that we're, oh, we can't do share the screen instead, we just stop, that we're working on, that is also virtual reality. So give me one sec. I'm going to share one more screen and then I'll hand it over. So this is a collaboration, and we're going to talk about collaboration later on, but this is a collaboration with a bunch of local companies to build a very complex virtual reality full motion flight simulator for helicopters. If the video will play here. Oh. It is loading. I'm sorry, that's not going to go. I'll try resetting it, and if that doesn't work, I'll just move on to the next presenter. So this is an example of connecting very complex magnetic actuator technology with virtual reality to create a very immersive, very realistic simulator of things, vehicles. In this instance, a flight simulator for a Coast Guard helicopter, but in other instances, it could be a fast boat or a tank crew, or sort of any sort of operation of complex equipment that really requires, the look and feel of the real thing. So again, this is an example of some of the technologies that we're working on using virtual reality and collaboration between industry partners and the government. And I'll stop sharing there and go back to my last slide and then move on. And then last slide. So just to round up, some of the benefits that we've seen from virtual reality, augmented reality training, to sort of put it all together, is a reduction in classroom time. You can generally train things faster to the tune of up to 80% by immersing a trainee. Reduction of wear and tear on expensive equipment. Flying a helicopter, every time an aircraft or a helicopter or submarine is used, its lifespan is deteriorated. Its lifespan goes down, or at least its time to the next maintenance period. So a reduction of time of complex equipment is important. There's also the expensive operating equipment, where a helicopter may cost $2,000 an hour in fuel and maintenance to operate, where reduction of that expense is important. There's also the reduction of time in hazardous conditions. If the activity that you're undertaking with your simulation or with your virtual reality is hazardous, like flying a helicopter or anything that could have an element of danger, then that reduces the time that you're actually practicing in danger. You find that there's higher retention rates through immersion. There's something around the 3D map that you create in your brain that allows you to retain things for longer and faster. For instance, if you see a picture of someone from the front, you may recognize that person from the front, but if you meet someone, even if you haven't seen them from behind, you can recognize them from behind because your mind paints this 3D cloud of the person, and it's much more, it's much easier for you to retain things that you've learned in 3D space. Less expensive than actual equipment as a training aid. For instance, if the Navy buys, 12 warships and then buys a 13th warship, or at least the weapons of the 13th warship to train on, that's a very expensive proposition to teach someone, some of the do's and don'ts of operating a gun. And the moment that something breaks in the fleet, the training aid is taken and sent off to the fleet to replace the broken one. So you may even lose your training aid. And then it's really great for sort of just-in-time refreshers. You could go into a ready room or into a classroom and take training right before you use that object that maybe you hadn't seen for 10 years or 5 years or 3 years since the last time you actually trained on it. So that's the end of mine, and I'll stop it and hand it over to Chris.
I'll just introduce Chris. Thanks, Scott. That was awesome to see. Really can see the, what you guys are doing in the aviation space is highly applicable in naval training and other use cases for the blue economy. Thank you. So Chris Pedrick, Lieutenant Commander Chris Pedrick of the Naval Training Development Center will discuss his unit's recent campaign to leverage from technology-enabled learning, or TEL, modalities for ocean and maritime skills training. This includes using augmented and virtual reality to practice maintenance routines, as well as leveraging additive manufacturing to create mock-ups and expose sailors to Industry 4.0. So I've gotten to know Chris over the last year, incredible man, and really happy to have him on the panel here with us today. So I'm going to turn it over to you, Chris. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks very much, Charles and Scott, and also Mayor Phillips. Just looking at the sharing, it'll take me a few seconds here. Okay. So I'm going to be speaking about three main things. First off, the Naval Experimental Technical Training Center, because that's pretty much the housing of what I'm going to be talking about. We have a large team there with, we work very closely with industry, which is one of the reasons that we're grouped together on this panel, together with Scott and Charles. So we've worked together closely on a number of projects. Specifically, how we use VR and AR is really for the impact of training and performance in the workplace. So the first thing I'm going to talk about is the INEX. So that's the Naval Experimental Technical Training Center. It really is a place that will be a nexus for the kind of work we're doing and collaborating with industry. Big part of what the mayor is talking about kind of bringing in and bridging to other community members, bridging with enterprise and other people like industry, Scott, Lamazoo, Race Rocks, all the different people you're hearing from today and others. The main components you're seeing here are inside the building itself. The building itself is a training platform in itself. So that we have a number of green technologies, whether it be the solar panels, the wind turbines, the actual battery banks that support them. All that becomes an actual useful situation in either real life because it's supporting the building, or in a student's world where they actually get to participate in some kind of part of the building. And using AR and VR will be a part of that. The other components are a production lab that we can actually build things that work in the training environment. Things like the Station IX, bottom right, an immersive trainer for VR, where you can play inside a VR space. and a number of pilot classrooms where we can actually project students into that classroom space as we're working on the development of the curriculum. So it allows that kind of interim space before it hits our fleet school, so that we can really incorporate the best technologies and work with our partners to develop that. Next, I'll be showing a short video. Hopefully this will work well. And this will explain a little bit more. So what's the impetus for the INEX, basically? So three main things. Obviously, we have a bunch of growing fleet requirements, and specifically to the tech training, which we do a significant amount of. There's an increased demand for that training, and also to make it more efficient. And the third major one is to just invigorate and kind of change the development cycle to be a little bit faster, moving up to prototyping much faster, getting a change in the training cycle, and so we can improve and take feedback right away into that cycle. So what does that mean to us with the challenge? It'll give us better training quality and proficiency overall, which should show very directly in the sailors. Gives us that improved cycle that I was referring to earlier. Ultimately, it gives us a collaborative environment, which is also what we're looking for. We have students, instructors, developers, people from industry all working together. And finally, it puts together a nice package for Victoria, which we're supporting a lot of the green initiatives in the building itself and in local businesses. Moving to the VR, I'll start first with a video. This is a recent, some work we're doing with a company called Chalk. We've been working closely with them for the last 6 months on building some VR. So this is just to give you an example for our naval warfare officers. So moving on now to the details of the VR. So typically we're using that for an enhanced skill development or retention. It allows, in some cases, a real simulator or the real equipment takes a lot of time and a lot of energy to do it. So in this case, it gives us an area that we can allow a student to progress at their own pace with a lot more detail, and using things like gamification, we can add a lot of valuable cues and also kind of develop their motivation around the different scenarios. Really, the VR experiences now compared to even a number of years ago are quite different, and a lot more immersive. The refresh rates on the video are much better. The way we can build and develop the scenarios is quantum leap forward as far as that. So that really is a major tool set that allows us to really help students, and it allows when somebody's forgotten a skill with them to go back to it quickly. And the last part is something that it kind of ties into what Charles was saying, is that data is a very important component of it. So as we're doing the experiments, we can actually measure heart rate, different kind of things as far as the student's ability and what's going on as far as the scenario is that their reaction to the scenarios, and ultimately the data when they finish scenarios of how they're doing, and allowing instructors and us as developers to enhance the scenarios to keep them at the right difficulty level and see where students are performing. On AR, similar but different, we can use AR in a training scenario that allows us to say in the working plant of iNext to actually have a student, a piece of equipment that we don't want to break, we can show it in a broken state and have a student solve that scenario live using augmented reality. Also, it allows us to support the training in a number of new ways that we weren't able to before. And ultimately, it allows us to go into an area and provide training at the time of need. So if you're in a case and you don't have to train everything on a ship, you can go in with a augmented reality set and learn something. You know, generally the principles because you've learned it before, but now you're applying it specific to that piece of gear. So that performance support component is a game changer in reducing the overall cost of our training and allowing our building the proficiency levels and having the access to the material at the right time. Rolling it back in the final pieces of how that affects iNext, all this comes together inside that building, which is being built in the fall. So it should be up and running by the late fall, which allows it that collaboration we were talking about, the fast scenario creation, and the use of the EVR and AR, not only in that space, but projecting into the ships and other units across Canada, including Naval Reserve units like Malahat here in Victoria or other ones coast to coast. So we always say the prelude to training is the work of the NTDCP. So it's a pleasure to present today, and we'll move into some additional questions that we've prepared. But I really want to also reach out to the great work of all the people at Naval Training Development Center Pacific. And it was a proud moment to be able to support in this presentation the work that they're doing regularly. So thanks to them, because I stand on the shoulders of a lot of giants behind me. And I'll turn the floor back over to Charles.
Thanks, Chris. It's always amazing to see everything that you guys are doing. You guys are really kind of advancing the adoption and leading the bleeding edge of applying these technologies. So, I think it's needless to say, but what the Navy and, what the support of the Canadian government is able to kind of accelerate a lot of technology adoption across Canada. It's awesome to see. So Scott, yep, you're here. Chris, you want to keep your video camera on? We're just going to open it up to kind of more of a general rapid fire discussion. And then I'll open it up to general questions from the chat. So one thing I really want to ask is, now that we've kind of seen this broad application of technology, from training to simulation and digital twinning and data-driven applications, how are you guys kind of seeing AR, VR driving an impact in the blue economy? Like, what does this mean for Victoria and the blue economy? Scott, why don't you jump in?
Yeah, so
Okay.
I mean, oh, can you hear me?
No, you're good.
I mean, just looking at looking at the economy and from a perspective of the economy, the work that the Navy in particular, but you've got the Coast Guard regenerating their fleet, you've got BC Ferries regenerating their fleet. The work on the training side that is going to have to go into these new fleets over the next 5-10 years, and sort of the roadmap that the Navy has shown industry over the last couple of years to get to that level of training is upwards of 800 or 900 jobs that are obviously, a lot of them will be on the coast and a lot of them will be in Victoria. The supporting industry, like Race Rocks and Lamazoo, and on the East Coast, like Modest Tree and Blue Drop, and the different people that are going to support the Navy in this growth are going to be hiring as well, creating jobs in this economy. And then whenever you create jobs, there's all the economic spin-offs from, the cafes are filled up to the restaurants to the cabs to the everything else, the housing market, the rent. So with the growth, the Navy in particular has this roadmap to grow their virtual training and their training development center exponentially over the next 4 or 5 years. That's going to have spin-off economic benefits to the entire region, and it's all around the blue economy and around the marine sector.
So more jobs, higher rent. I'm just
Yeah.
kidding. Chris, what's your take on this?
I think a lot of it is the interconnection, as we've kind of been talking together, is that there's a lot of power in the interconnection. I think more and more, like we were talking in the prep for the seminar about systems. And I think Coast in itself is trying to set up a system, that drives the kind of economics. It helps us produce better, more qualified sailors faster. The more we work together, that synergy and helping to kind of refine and develop that system, I think is a huge part of what we're all working together. And it's some unknown. Like I think we all struggle with how we can make this system better to produce, the jobs that Scott's talking about and use the data that you guys are creating. But we only do it together. Basically, I think that's what we've all, collaboratively learned and we've discussed offline. So how can we make that better is the challenge we face every day, and how can we work closer? I think that's my thinking.
Absolutely. So you see the collaboration as a key component, and do you see the Coast Center as like an enabler for collaboration, or kind of a catalyst, or a collider for collaboration?
Absolutely, because it basically is something we've needed for I think a long time. There's been some smaller initiatives, and we try to come together in various forms, but I see huge power into that, both economically and just for the region. Absolutely.
That's great. So the other kind of question I want to open it up to, and then we'll leave it to the panel, the chat questions, is we know how AR and VR can be used today. What do you guys kind of see? What are your guys' kind of projections in 5 or 10 years? How is that going to evolve? What are going to be the main applications of AR VR?
I think for us, I'll jump in with a couple, because there's always an increasing demand for training, because most people think that training is the solution. And that's why it came up in Scott's talk about doing a really robust analysis and understanding where the problems lie. So we're always pushing people back to really understanding what we're solving. So when you do that effectively, but doing it fast, because quite often in previous iterations, those analyses were taking too much time. So we're getting better at doing those faster. But once you've analyzed the problem and you know where AR and VR fit, and then you can prototype it. So that's where we're trying to move to the prototyping stage with help from companies like both of yours. If we move that prototype really quickly, you can get your eye of, does this solve the problem? Like right away, you start to see it. You bring people into the room, people working with that technology right away. You can see when it's working. Like it kind of like, we've all seen those moments where something, wow, this is like in our VR right now. Literally, we were showing it last week for the Commander RCN. He had never seen it before. He's not in a job that typically drives ships right now at this point. He controls like the organization, but right away he was immersed. And he was like he did not want to take it off, because he would like brought him back so quickly to maneuvering a ship. So that the VR application is so immersive that whether you say in the case of reducing training time, when AR often used, is you can be given a task that you have to do in short notice. The AR allows you to kind of learn and relearn or redo that task with a little bit of support, so that you still have a supervisor, but you have that supporting mechanism. So that massively changes and reduces the scope of the training, but it means we have to be really targeted. So having these tools available is a big part of that.
Scott?
Sounds good.
What's your prediction of the future?
Oh, okay, right. Yeah, I think that we're going to see more reliance on visualization and on virtual reality and augmented reality into the future. It's just it does take longer currently to build training of that nature, but as you know, better tools, maybe even, you know, artificial intelligence or machine learning helps build the tools, you'll see that there'll be more and more virtual reality and augmented reality solving problems in the future, because it is so much less expensive once you actually have the tool built, and so much more beneficial than a lot of the older ways of teaching complex problems and with complex machinery.
Right. So kind of unlocking more value by reducing the barrier to entry and making it more accessible and iterative. That's kind of what you guys are both seeing is it's going to rapidly change. We're going to find new use cases because it's going to get cheaper and cheaper and more prevalent effectively.
That's right. Right now, it's still, right now, like I was saying at the beginning of my presentation, where, you know, sometimes you solve the problem with less expensive techniques, because it is still the cost of acquisition of a virtual training for your individual piece of equipment is still quite high. But I think that as that comes down, as you know, as there's more talent available to build it, as there's easier tools for capturing the data, like what you guys are doing, and then there's easier tools for taking the data and putting it into something useful for the learner, then the cost will come down and the use will go way up.
Yeah, amazing. I personally, if I were to kind of apply my thinking and our approach to this question, I see the prevalence of data, right? The Cambrian explosion of data, all of these systems, and you know what Ocean Networks Canada is doing, and all of the other companies in the region, they're generating data. And I think there's going to be a lot of value that isn't quite unlocked yet, right? Like, what does this mean for the environment, for ESG, for sustainable and renewable energy? How do we incorporate these projects and these you know, advancing technologies into the region and as part of the blue economy, right? You know, we can't keep relying on fossil fuels and energy, but there are other options, and we have tidal power, we have wind, we have subsea carbon sequestration and environmental sequestration. So that's, for me, where I see a lot of potential in the future. Well, thank you both. I'm going to turn it over to the chat questions. So just give me a second. So first question, moving forward, will you also be including the other AR, VR, MR providers that were made mention of earlier as future possible panelists to get a more diverse overview? Absolutely. I mean, if we are asked to do another panel, I think it would be amazing to get more participation. This panel was convened, you know, with about 30 days notice. So everybody's very busy, but I'd love to hear from anybody else in the region that would love to partake in a future conversation. And maybe there's a opportunity for a regular meetup or quarterly meetup or something like that. And I know that Lieutenant Commander Petrick is very interested in getting to know more people in the region and who the other kind of technology providers are as well. Not to speak for you, Chris.
No, and hopefully we do more events that we can kind of basically, like you said, that they could bring in more people in, you know, more like formal and informal kind of means. You can always reach out to any of the three of us too, because we're always kind of looking for those opportunities. But absolutely a key component is actually like leveraging the horsepower and brain power of everyone. So anything we can do that supports that is absolutely amazing and worthwhile.
Absolutely. Next question, are you planning to extend the VR, AR training capabilities to the maintenance of non-combat, in quotes, below the deck equipment, such as ABB motors / breakers / transformers, etc.? Chris, Scott, I think this one is probably for you guys.
I think Chris can talk about maybe what they're going to do in the future, but we're already building below the deck non-combat augmented reality and virtual trainers for things like the PG&D. For we're looking at, you know, a bunch of pieces of equipment on the older warships or the current warships, yeah, that's coming down the pipes as we speak under our MarTech and our distributed learning RCN contract.
Yeah, in line with that, like recently we did some work on the AOPS high voltage system. Again, the non-combat part, but the whole electrical system working on a virtual task trainer with the help of a mixture of different people, including Race Rocks, Modestry, and others. So definitely some pieces there. The annex itself, just as an example, like some of the diesel generators in the building, which is a really representative piece of gear. We have ongoing augmented and virtual reality programs to help leverage that. So I see that tech part being a major part of that work. And I think back to the sharing part is I think some of these systems are going over other places, like not just within the military, but other places, but like right away cross government, Coast Guard, et cetera. A lot of these systems are very similar. Like we were already reaching out to the Coast Guard because they were working in high voltage before we were, and leveraging expertise, looking at the equipment. We're doing more and more every week, realistically, not just nationally, but internationally with different groups. I think we're getting better and better at leveraging, like as we're working on one piece of equipment, it's quite similar to another one, being able to use that to then reiterate to a new piece of equipment. There's huge power, and that cycle is now like 10 or 20 times faster than it ever was in the past.
Awesome. Next question is, what are some common misconceptions about AR/VR that need to be overcome to support their expansion in the blue economy? From my perspective, I'd say a lot of people, especially in the broad consumer space, probably see AR/VR as entertainment tools and video game related. Most people have tried Google Cardboard, and that is not VR in my experience. That is the poorest introduction to VR because it makes most people sick, and it's low resolution, et cetera, et cetera. So for me, it's really that the applicability of AR/VR is so broad that we're only just starting to scratch the surface. What are the kind of the killer applications of AR/VR? And I think training is one of those, but there are others. So as we kind of start surfacing those and uncovering them, it's going to be leading to more value that can trickle into the blue economy. That's my take.
Yeah, adding to that, I think that like a lot of people start in that game space so that there's there. So, but when we did a lot of research of looking around, and a lot of it we were saying kind of repeating. It's not really adding value. It's interesting, especially if you're a gamer. There's value and it's interesting probably. But when you get into a training modality and you look at what skill you're teaching, say on the one that I was showing in our video, where you're teaching people to maneuver ships, which is super expensive, but super important. It's one of the things that makes our Navy like the professional organization is to do things in a difficult situation. Building that skill with a student when they're one-on-one with the device is hugely powerful. Like it's the cost of a $500 headset and development time to do that, which is game changing as far as skill development. So like that, when you look at it from a training perspective, in line with what you're saying, Charles, is that it changes everything. And as you drill down into that space, which we're doing together with the two of you and others, you found like there's gold. Like there's absolutely, when you understand the skills that need to develop and you hand it to a student, you can see it in their eyes when we've got 10 or 20 minutes in it and they're not putting it down. It's because like the quotes that we're getting, I was like, it's like, wow, like we're hitting students that have gone through training without it, and it's really like, wow, if only like I would have been able to be so much better by the time I did my simulation runs or got to a ship, because I've been able to practice something that was difficult. And we can now, have that practice area expanded. So it is really like, if people haven't tried it, it's worth it, but you have to find something that's training related because it is different. So that's part of that misconception is if you think it's not, we use gamification for motivation, but it's not a game. So.
Yeah. Unfortunately, we're at time. We could keep going on this subject for hours and hours. But any closing remarks that you guys want to add?
No, I think just thanks to Coast, like the idea is powerful. And I think we all are trying hard to kind of collaborate to build it. So thanks for Coast for inviting us and definitely the Navy as part of it.
Similar sentiment. Yeah, thank you to Coast for hosting us, and looking forward to seeing more from where it's going to go.
Awesome. Well, thank you everybody for coming, and I'll turn it over to Alicia for any kind of wrap up. Thanks everyone. Have a great one.
Thank you so much, Charles. Thank you for leading the conversation today. Thank you, Scott and Chris, for the lively discussion. It was really fascinating. I learned so much, and I imagine others who joined us did as well. I'm Alicia Glover. I'm the Manager of Strategic Partnerships at South Island Prosperity Partnership, and I support the incubation of Coast. Please join us for our next Coast Talk on July 21st at 11 a.m. Pacific. In the meantime, you can learn more about Coast by going to canadacoast.ca. There you can learn more about becoming a member and sign up. Membership is free for a limited time, and early members have an opportunity to help us build a clean tech innovation hub here on Southern Vancouver Island. Thanks again for joining us, and we will see you next month.